while some of the data obviously shows an improved economy, a lot of folks were not feeling that directly to them. And I think that's really important. And then the one thing that I think is really critical here, and something that I know a lot of folks are talking about, is it's not just the policy, and it's not just what we're promoting out there as Democrats or as a party. It's where we're communicating. And I think that the right and particularly the far right, they have mastered communicating in all of these new spaces, these niche mass media spaces, where they're reaching people in places that we are not. So we've got to be not just in traditional media, not just in podcasts and media, but we've now got to think about how we communicate, because there is an enormous amount of misinformation, disinformation, and in some cases, just complete fabrication and lies that are being pumped out to communities, in Latino communities and other communities out there, that we have no way of taking on and telling actually facts and the truth. And so people are getting their information out in such different ways. That has to be also at the top of our agenda as we think about our elections in the future and how we get our message out.
You know, Congressman, I'm glad you brought up the Latino community, because among several voting groups, one of the most surprising jumps in terms of support for Donald Trump came from Latino men. Were Democrats just not listening to them along the way? Were they failing to maybe even ask the right questions to begin with? I mean, I'm not a huge fan of exit polls, but I have been listening to the interviews that have been going on, and it seems to me that there's more of an emphasis on the economy than on maybe the true policy issues that we saw from Harris.
So I think a couple things. I mean, first, I think, we should be clear. I mean, Donald Trump improved in almost every group, right? Latino men, young people, suburban women. I mean, he increases margins on every group. As it relates to Latino men, I go back. I was with in Nevada just maybe a month ago or so. I talked about 30, 40 young Latino men who were still undecided, and we were having conversations about the future. And two things that struck me. One was that they were not seeing improvements to the economy in the way that we saw it in the data, right? They really felt that prices were really hurting them and their families. And then we heard that over and over again. And then the second thing brings me back to this question about where folks are getting their information. The folks and the young men that I were talking to, they weren't getting their information from reading the New York Times or the Washington Post, or even by watching cable news. They're getting their information from YouTube, from other communication channels, from these small digital platforms. And so we've got to be also in all of those spaces and recognize that communities like the Latino community are now consuming information in different ways. And so that's got to be part of this reflection that we do as a party. And clearly, the economy was top of mind for voters, and that includes Latino men.
I just wanted to follow up quickly on the point that you just made, though. I find it hard to believe, though, that the Democrats were unaware that these communities, these groups of voters, were getting their information from sources like that. I mean, is this a little bit of some kind of too little, too late analysis that's coming from the Democrats when it came to this idea of kind of getting that message across? Because substantively, it was a chasm between what Kamala Harris was going to be able to accomplish, what she's done and what she was going to be able to do for these communities, and what Donald Trump can't do and promises to do, which is even worse, which is basically mass deportation of these communities.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think first, Democrats obviously and the campaign invested heavily in reaching communities through a variety of media. So I think that's also true. But I think the level to which the right has done this and has kind of mastered the reaching folks in different spaces, I think is something that we have to do a better job at, and certainly we have a lot of work to do there. I think that is really, really critical. But at the same time, I think we have to understand that we have a message, and we are the party of working people. We've got to double down on that. We are the party that has been here to actually help people. And so we've got to get that message out in a much stronger way, in as many ways possible. And I think it's also important that we have to enter a moment, we have to reflect, we have to do research, we've got to talk to folks, and we've got to, most importantly, to listen. And so I think that it's also a little early to understand everything that went wrong, but we have to acknowledge that we lost and then do better work ahead to listen to the voters out there.
California Congressman Robert Garcia, it's always so good to see you, and I want to thank you for all the hard work that you did as well. Thanks for being here. For more, joining me now is Olivia Troy, former Homeland Security Advisor to Vice President Mike Pence. Olivia, the same thanks to you for the hard work that you put out there on the campaign trail. We saw you stumping with Vice President Harris. How are you feeling? I've had difficulty expressing it myself, but I wanted to know how you're feeling after what I think is a disastrous outcome.
Obviously, I'm disappointed and I am worried for what's to come for our country. I think, everything that I said during the campaign remains true about my concerns about what it means for us domestically as a country and our homeland security and our national security apparatus. I think, I do still believe that she would have made an amazing president for all of us, and I still stand by her. I think she did a great job of growing a coalition of unity, and I hope that that coalition will remain going forward, because we're certainly going to need it as we navigated this, these uncharted waters that we're about to go into, Katie.
Olivia, the New Republic had an interesting article. It looked back at the election, and again, there's a lot of kind of benefit of hindsight a little bit here, but it said in part that instead of running on bold, progressive, popular policies that helped win the White House in 2020, the Democratic Party abandoned its base to court an imaginary Liz Cheney superfan demographic. I mean, I have to ask you this specifically, right? Do you think the Democrats should have focused more on their, quote, base instead of courting what Michael Tomasky is calling the imaginary Liz Cheney superfan demo? And we just heard from Congressman Garcia, and I've been reading reports that, the far right does such an effective job of being able to reach voters. But I would think that if you spoke to a Trump convert, somebody who doesn't support him, that actually would resonate when you're having a conversation and you're trying to court a voter to come and vote for Kamala Harris.
Look, I was out in battleground states. I was talking to Republicans and independent voters and centrists like myself, and they're out there and they're watching this closely. And I hope that we don't end up continuing to isolate them, because they don't identify with the populist MAGA movement. They don't identify with the extremes of this, but they are in the center. And I think that going forward politically, I think people are taking a step back and trying to figure out, where do I truly fit in? And I think, he was absolutely right when it comes to reaching people. I think the right-wing machine has always been somewhat more effective because they all rode together. And I think we've got to figure out how we counter that.
You've witnessed and experienced firsthand what Donald Trump is capable of during his first term in the White House. Now he's coming back. And as I've been and others have been warning for a long time, no guardrails, and even more loyalists that will be installed. What is your first and immediate concern about what's going to happen once he's sworn in January?
I think I worry about the people serving in our federal government, and I strongly worry about what's to come for our national security. I am concerned for the intelligence community and the people that serve in it. I certainly was there the first time around, right at the onset of the first Trump administration. And I saw the attempts to weaponize and politicize intelligence for personal gain by Donald Trump and for his own personal agenda. And so those are the things that I've been thinking about lately, is what does this look like? Whether it looks like, internationally for what's to come for NATO, whether it's reneging on our commitment to Article 5 of when they attack one member of NATO, they attack all of us. I don't think Donald Trump used it that way. And so these are all the things that I'm processing right now and thinking about. How will the intelligence community respond to this? And I think there are a lot of Americans out there that, yes, they're domestically focused. Yes, it's the economy. Yes, there are all these issues that they voted on that don't truly understand the ramifications of what's to come for our own personal security here on the homeland.
Olivia, I did want to leave with this question, which is there have been direct threats made by Trump and other of his supporters about retribution to be taken against those that were brave enough over the years to speak out and to be a voice of reason and to explain why a Trump presidency a second time around would be even worse than the first. Do you have a concern for your own safety and for your own future in our country?
Well, I'd be lying if I said I didn't, Katie. And so that's certainly something that my family and I are thinking about. But I will say this, I am prepared to face the consequences simply for telling the truth. And if that, brings with it whatever it may, I will continue to be a person out there standing up for our country and for the democratic values that I believe in, and I hope that I can be an example for others. These are going to be rough times, but it doesn't mean we back down from it. I think it is now that we actually have to band together and really stay strong about this authoritarian type of extremist movement that we are up against.
Well, Olivia, one thing you always do is you always speak truth to power, and I always appreciate you for doing that. Olivia Troy, thanks for being here. I really, really am grateful.
Thank you, Katie.
And coming up after the break, building bridges, what Democrats can do to recover and recapture the voters lost in one of the lowest turnout elections in recent history, and what drove many voters, especially men, to abandon the party for Trump. Well, I could probably answer that. That's coming up next.
Push 3, take.
I want our viewers to feel seen and heard. Suddenly they change the rules. I want them to feel like I'm their voice.
Dissolve.
So what they are screaming at their television, why isn't the media talking about this? Why aren't they asking that? The migrant issue. I'm hoping the way we approach the show, the questions we ask, are the same things you are asking your friends and family. But the question on everyone's mind, that's what we're trying to get at. Because we need the answers, and I think our audience does too.